Okay, so you're inspired by DJ's success and grit. You have an idea and you want to pursue it, but something is holding you back. Well, help is on the way. Lisa Orbe Austin is a licensed psychologist, executive coach, and organizational consultant. She spends her days trying to help all people, but especially women of color, figure out what is preventing them from reaching their potential. Her new book, Own Your Greatness, tackles the concept of impostor syndrome, what it is, and how you can overcome self-doubt to succeed. I sat down with Lisa this week to talk and to listen.
What is impostor syndrome?
So imposter syndrome is this experience. It's a phenomenon. It's not a mental health issue. It's a phenomenon that exists when you have credentials, you have experience, you have competencies, you have skills. However, you have not internalized them. And as a result of not internalizing them, you are constantly fearing that you're going to be found out as fraudulent or fake or incompetent. So in order to compensate for that, you overwork and overproduce in order to avoid that fear of being exposed. And so it leads to burnout. It leads to shooting for opportunities that are beneath your skills and competencies, and it really foreshortens your career opportunities.
I want to go back to that in a moment, but I do want to delve into what we're seeing happening in society today and your thoughts and your perspective.
Well, I think everyone's had sort of a different experience of it, given their own histories and their own kind of what they're coming to in this moment. For me, it's actually been a really exciting time. It feels like a time where there's a lot of action being taken to really dismantle systemic and structural racism. So that feels really exciting because I'm also seeing it not only in the world, but in my community and things that are personally relevant to me, where there are incidents happening and the people connected to those incidents are working to dismantle the structure and the systems. And so it feels really exciting. It feels like a real historic moment that could really change things. I am hopeful for that. I'm not completely sure that is going to happen, but I am hopeful for that.
How would you describe systemic racism?
So systemic racism is the experience that, a system is meant to uphold white supremacy. So whatever it does, the way it's set up, it's meant to kind of protect whiteness and protect white advancement and suppress any other people of color in that process. And so it's done through things like that we think are very simple. For example, some in the hiring process or when people are sort of looking for candidates for a job, they'll use their friends, the people that they know, people that don't even need to go through the process in order to get to bypass. And there's lots of discrimination that occurs in all different levels of the organization that has to be looked at and have to be dismantled and have to work to kind of correct those systemic changes. Sometimes people are not quite clear about this is what's actually occurring, but it's very clear in sort of the process where you see, that people of color are not advancing, they're not getting senior level positions, they don't have a voice at the table, and all the systems in the structure of the organization work to suppress that.
So is there an answer, or are there certain actionable steps that people and or companies, communities can take to improve things?
Yeah, there are a lot of really concrete, actionable steps. For example, going to blind resumes, right? Taking names off. There's been a lot of discrimination related to naming and people assuming people's races and backgrounds as a result of that. So going to blind resumes, going to rubrics to how people are evaluated on interviews as opposed to people's feel for a person, where that rubric has to pass at a certain level. A number of people have to score this person. Thinking about pipelines, where are you pulling people from? Are you pulling them from the same places? Are you not diversifying your pipelines and your pools? Having a chief diversity officer, oftentimes a chief diversity officer, the person in charge of diversity, doesn't have a seat at the table, doesn't have a seat on the board. So in big, massive decisions in the organization have nothing to do with diversity because there's nobody speaking about it and nobody calling to it. So it's really thinking about structurally, how do you prevent from pipeline to top level? How do you prevent this from happening, and taking a deep look at the ways in which you're perpetuating it?
As a therapist, are there specific barriers or challenges that women face or what Black women face?
Yes, I mean, I think there are. I think, a lot of, Black women in the workplace experience a lot of stereotyping based on who they are and their identity, both as a woman and as a Black woman, around being an angry Black woman. If they vocalize anything, it's interpreted in particular ways. So I see that a lot for women, Black women. Oftentimes, in a lot of circumstances, because of who I work with, they're often the only in their workplace or one of a very few. So if they ever raise issues around race or gender or the intersection of the both, they are oftentimes ostracized and scapegoated and pushed out of the organization if they cause too much trouble. So it is an additional level of burden to have to be in an environment as a Black woman because of the discrimination and the targeting that you're often faced with if you rock the boat in any way or if you express yourself in any way that is seen as unacceptable.
And also, is there in terms of, I was reading one of the articles that you were quoted in terms of mental health and African-American women or Black women, that the group as a whole not seeking out mental health as high percentages as other populations because of history.
Yeah, there's been a history of racism within the system of mental health and healthcare in general. So there is a sort of skepticism about sort of mental health and whether or not they'll be pathologized in ways that are not appropriate. And so I often talk about, and there's very few of us, there are very few Black clinicians in the space. I think the number is 5% for women, for Black psychologists, and 2% of psychologists are Black men. So it does mean that likely you are going to see a white clinician, and there are culturally competent white clinicians, but you must sort of have the skill and ability to kind of talk about these issues with them as you're consulting with them to make sure that they're competent in ways that you need and to be able to ask for what you need. If I think that as a community, we need to kind of get more support and help for the trauma and the pain that we've experienced. That sometimes what we have around us is not enough, and they're also hurting. That you need sometimes professional help that really can change the game. Like if you can work on your trauma, it doesn't get passed down another generation, and you free another generation from generations of trauma. So there's something such a gift to generations you can't even see if you get help.
Wow. Well, you've given us so much to think about today, and I thank you so much for sharing your time. You've been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This has been so fun.
And if you'd like more information on Lisa and her company, her website is dynamictransitionsllp.com. Also, her book, Own Your Greatness, is on Amazon right now. And